of congressmen, including two from New York, Democrats Jerry Nadler and Mondaire Jones, introducing legislation to expand the U.S. Supreme Court from the current 9 justices to just 13.
It also will enable us to do justice and to rectify the great injustice that was done in packing the court.
One decision at a time, the right-wing majority on the Supreme Court has unraveled the greatest achievements of the civil rights movement. To produce a government that does not look like, understand, or even pretend to represent the American people.
Congressman Jones represents parts of Westchester and all of Rockland Counties, and you see him right there joining us live this morning. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so good to see you yet again. I want to talk about the Supreme Court in just a second, but we do have two major national stories that I want to get to first up, including a mass shooting. I'm sure you've heard about this at a FedEx facility in Indianapolis and the unrest over police-involved deaths in Black and brown communities. So let me start with that mass shooting, the latest in several, in fact, over the past few weeks. We talk a lot about doing something. We look to Congress to do something, but it never seems to truly happen. Will this spark any change?
I'm hopeful that it will. You know, my colleagues who are Democratic in the House of Representatives recently passed 2 pieces of common sense gun reforms. One is a bill that would establish universal background checks, and the other would end the so-called Charleston loophole, which would extend the time that the FBI has to do its background checks from 3 days to 10 days before someone seeking to purchase a firearm is able to obtain one automatically. These provisions, like so many others, including an assault weapons ban, which used to exist in this country, are so popular among the American people. I mean, well over 80% of the American people support these bills.
So why aren't they getting passed?
They aren't getting passed because today we have a filibuster, a relic of the Jim Crow era, that Republicans are weaponizing to prevent the American people from actually having safe regulations that would end gun violence. And it is deeply disturbing. Every single week, it seems we are hearing news of one of these mass shootings. I was in middle school when Columbine first happened. I'm one of the younger members of Congress, as you know, and I never imagined that years later, mass shootings would become the norm. That is what happens when you have an anti-democratic system that results in people being elected to Congress who are not representative of the average American view in this country. And so I'm hopeful that people will actually come around in the Senate such that we can either repeal the filibuster or we can get 10 Republican senators who are willing to vote in the best interest of the American people.
To support the bill. All right, we'll see what plays out on that front. In the meantime, though, I want to talk about these police shootings. There is Daunte Wright in Minnesota, and now we're seeing video of the killing of a 13-year-old boy named Adam Toledo in Chicago. What can be done to stop that, and are there plans for additional police reforms at the federal level?
Democrats in the House of Representatives recently passed a bill called the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. And let me also start by saying that I am grieving too for the families of these people who have been unjustifiably murdered in the street. I had the opportunity to watch that video last night, and like many millions of Americans, I was deeply disturbed by someone who was literally following the instructions of the police officer by raising his unarmed hands, and he was still shot dead anyway. I mean, what do you have to do to survive a police encounter where the police officer is telling you something, you are complying, and still you are being abused, in this case, murdered?
Well, that's the question. That's the question so many Americans are asking, and they're looking to leaders like you to say, okay, if we can't get it done on the streets, if we can't have that protection out there when it's needed, what can you do as a congressman, as a leader, to prevent this from happening in the future?
We passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which would implement a number of reforms, including training, but also making sure that people are held accountable, because we know that when people know that they will be held accountable, their behavior tends to change, especially within law enforcement. You know, as of now, we have a legal system where it is extremely difficult to hold accountable people who kill George Floyd and the young 13-year-old who we saw murdered on that webcam footage last night. And we are waiting again in the United States Senate. We are waiting in the United States Senate for 10 Republican senators to either do the right thing or Democratic senators like Joe Manchin to repeal the filibuster so that we can legislate in the best interest of the American people. Communities are hurting, and they have not had the relief and the justice, equal justice under the law that is promised to them in the United States Constitution. As you might imagine, this is deeply personal for me as an African-American man.
It's deeply personal for a lot of our viewers as well. I want to ask you, because I'm running out of time here, let's talk about the Supreme Court. It's a big topic of discussion this morning. You and several of your colleagues joined forces to introduce legislation to expand the court from 9 to 13 justices. Now, this was floated when Amy Coney Barrett was quickly confirmed following the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So tell us more about your decision to introduce this bill, and do you think it's got a good shot?
It is an idea that is deeply rooted in the American tradition. In fact, the size of the United States Supreme Court has changed 7 times in our nation's history. And Article 3 provides Congress the ability to adjust the size of the Supreme Court. The fact is, in the year 2021, our democracy is hanging by a thread. That racist voter suppression bill that became law in Georgia, SB 202, was only possible because the Roberts Court, in an opinion authored by Chief Justice Roberts in 2013, struck down the heart of the Voting Rights Act, that bipartisan piece of legislation that was reauthorized in the year 2006. And we know this same court decided Citizens United, which invited a torrent of corporate money, unlimited corporate spending in our elections. We must restore power to the people and save our democracy by expanding the court and getting a majority of people who are committed to the rule of law and to the fundamental right to vote in this country. Otherwise, Jim Crow will prevail.
I can hear the passion in your voice here. Let me ask you quickly, would you likely push the Supreme Court toward a more moderate or liberal court, if that's fair?
We have a 6-3 hyper-partisan far-right majority on the Supreme Court that is hostile to democracy itself. And so court expansion is about providing balance. Most Americans don't think that the Supreme Court should be 6-3 anything. And so we have to make sure that we are having a Supreme Court that is representative of American public opinion, that is respectful of the will of Congress, so that it is not striking down legislation that was nearly unanimously took effect as a result of the votes in Congress, including in the House and in the Senate. And we do that by adding 4 seats to the United States Supreme Court so that we can save our democracy. We'll
see what happens. Nancy Pelosi says she has no plans to bring this bill to the floor, right? So I'm sure you're not so happy about that.
I wouldn't want her to bring it to the floor today, because I haven't had a conversation to speak to every single member of my colleagues since introducing the legislation yesterday. We know that this is long-suffering work, but I think in the days and in the weeks and the months to come, increasingly, the American people and my colleagues in the House, with whom I've already been having great conversations, and in the Senate as well, will come around to this important democracy-saving legislation.
Congressman, we will be watching it very closely. All of these things that you discuss, all important topics. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate seeing you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely.